Hello, welcome to the Wildline Podcast. I'm your host, Dan. This is a podcast about movies and how much money they make at the box office. Today is going to be the normal weekend review show, March 22nd through the 24th, 2019. The big opener this weekend was Us. So we will do a deep dive into Us and how well it did. Fantastic. We'll walk through the rest of the top 10. I'll talk a little bit about some limited stuff outside the top 10, and then we'll walk through what's going to happen in the next few weeks at the box office. But let's get right into it. Number one this weekend was Us with 70.2 million is the latest number that just came out from Universal this morning. 70.2 million for an original horror film opening in March. Absolute insanity. Now, going into this weekend, the expectations were very high. The pre-sale figures from Fandango suggested some crazy opening, like $100 million was possible. I got on that hype train and got burnt a little bit, I'll be honest. But $70 million is an outrageous opening for a film like this. Tracking was only $45 million last week. So it went way past tracking and has done incredibly well here. We kind of knew that when the first preview numbers came in, they were a little bit muted from Deadline. They're saying, oh, it's about 4. And people are like, wait, 4 million? That's not enough to get where we want this thing to go. But then as the night wore on, it was like 7 million and sort of got up into where it needed to go to hit a $70 million opening weekend. This Saturday didn't really drop at all. I think it actually increased from the real Friday number. So people thought it was going to be front loaded massively. To some degree it was, but not as much as I thought it was. So people are showing up, walking up to this movie on Saturday, and they will today. So that's where we're getting that $70.2 million from. It's a lot of that walk up outside pre-sales. So Jordan Peele has to be super happy with this. Blumhouse has to be ecstatic, and Universal is just like printing money from this distribution deal for this movie. If you go back, so this is Jordan Peele's second movie, right? The first movie you put out, and this almost kind of feels like a spiritual successor to Get Out, which came out in February 2017. That opened up at $33 million and closed out at 176, a 5x multiplier. Get Out was one of the biggest stories of 2017, and it's one of the biggest stories, I think, of the decade so far at the box office. That was a film that the moment the trailer dropped, I want to say it was around Christmas or the holiday season, 2016. Someone slacked it to me online. I was like, dude, you've got to watch this. And the moment I saw it, I was like, this is going to be massive. And you could tell right away, it had a very fresh, interesting style to it, interesting kind of engaging story and hook. But I think also, too, it felt very political. It felt very almost like a polemic, which is what horror films used to be all about. You definitely want to scare people and make them uncomfortable, but you also want to present this different perspective than what people are seeing every day. And I think, with the race relations where they're at in the United States right now at a really low, Get Out was kind of like a way to relieve a lot of that anxiety and stress around it and say, hey, yeah, this is really bad. This is happening. Let's let's come together and watch this movie and sort of present the feelings that people are having about what's happening in this country politically in a way that, is like enjoyable and entertaining. That's a lot of what horror movies and movies in general are about, sort of releasing what's inside of us. And I think Get Out was a prime example of that. And that's why it did so well. And it wasn't just the African-American audience that showed up for Get Out. It was everybody. You don't make $176 million just off of one group of people in this country. Everybody went out to see it. And so it was a cultural milestone, cultural touchstone, if you will. It was a moment. And Jordan Peele has been riding that sort of hype wave ever since. And when Us was announced, it was like, all right, let's do this. Everybody's super excited. Everybody loves Get Out. Critically acclaimed, super popular movie. What's he going to come up with next? He's got the Twilight Zone series on CBS happening as well. So he's really at the sort of top of his hype peak game right now. And so, with Us coming out, the expectation was very high. Both sort of the quality of the film was expected to be very good, and the performance was expected to be fantastic. Now, it opened over double what Get Out opened. Will it end up in the same spot? Well, let's talk more about the quality and what people thought about it, then we'll try to make a guess and see where this thing ends up. Just the baseline, basic critical stuff. Rotten Tomatoes score 94% for Us. Actual score 8 out of 10 from critics. So loved by critics, absolutely loved. Audience score Rotten Tomatoes, take it with a grain of salt, 69%. It was 33%. It's being hacked by racists. That's what's happening. But, there's a little bit of a softness, I think, to the audience scores, because the cinema score did come in at a B, which is okay for a horror movie. I was thinking B plus for this, based on the Rotten Tomato scores and the anecdotal stuff that I was reading online about people's response. I think what's happening here is it's a challenging film that kind of walks the line between a horror film and what would be called a thriller. And I think that genre sort of fogginess and the challenging nature of the film has left a bad taste in some people's mouths. Not everybody's mouths. So B is not bad, but it's not probably what you'd want for a movie like this. I would expect a B plus or A minus for this. Letterboxd score, which is the film nerds, they gave it a 3.9 out of 5. Comparatively to other horror movies that have come out recently, Hereditary got a 3.9 as well. Get Out has a 4.1 on Letterboxd. Quiet Place is the 3.8, so it's right in that neck of the woods of some of the most popular, most revered horror films of the last couple of years. 3.5 stars on PostTrack out of 5. See a little softness there too. What I'm seeing with these scores is that people who are really film aficionados, which are film critics and film nerds, I'll call them, they absolutely love this film because they like things that are challenging. They like things that are unique. They give extra points for an interesting and even like a strange perspective in a film. They like newness and novelty within what they see. The average movie-going audience is less inclined to give extra points for newness and uniqueness. They want something that's a little bit more familiar, a little bit more palatable in general. And I think anytime they see something new or is something they haven't seen before, sometimes there's an aversion or reaction to it. I think we're seeing a mild case of that right now. So the film nerds and film aficionados absolutely adore this film. The average audience is just a little bit less so. It's not a huge divergence there, but there's definitely a difference here in how the average movie-going audience is viewing it versus the film aficionados. So it's a record opening for an original horror film, third best horror film opening of all time, behind It, which opened at 123, I think, and then Halloween, which opened up at 76 last fall, which was also a Universal Blumhouse sort of co-production distribution thing going on. So, I mean, Blumhouse is the most powerful name in horror right now. I don't see that changing in the next 4 to 5 years. They're what New Line was in the 80s, like Dimension back in the 90s. They have figured out a format, it works, and they're going to keep doing it until it doesn't work anymore. And I don't see it failing anytime soon. So Blumhouse is horror in the 2010s, essentially, into the 2020s. We talked about pre-tracking or pre-week tracking last week at 45%. So it went or 45 million. It went way past that $45 million tracking. I did think that there was a possibility it could get to the $100 million mark opening weekend. But that was based on, that was based on some Fandango data that was coming out. All the movie nerds on the box office forums and stuff on Reddit and wherever, we were all jumping all over that Fandango pre-sale data, like, oh, this is going to be massive. $80 million is the basement, which tends to happen with a group of people like us. So it definitely way overperformed expectations, but it didn't necessarily meet the outrageous hypeness of the nerds. In terms of who went to go see this movie, over 25 was 62%, and under 25 was 38% of the audience. In terms of relating to the average movie-going audience, a little bit over-indexed on the under 25. So younger people showed up more to this than the average movie, which makes sense, especially because something similar happened with Get Out. Men over 25 was 31% of the audience. Under was 19%. Same exact numbers for women over 25, 31%, and under 25 was 19%. So basically a male-female split of 50-50 there for you. In terms of the ethnic, racial breakdown of the audience, 35% was white. That's way below the average movie-going audience, which is more like the 53%, like about 50%. African-American audience was way over-indexed. Normally they're about 12% of ticket buyers. Here they were 32%. Latinos and Asians were respectively pretty normal, 22% and 7% towards the average movie-going audience there. So what happened was essentially the white audience didn't show up as much. African-American audience showed up way more, which makes sense for a movie like this. In terms of who gave it a really good score, females under 25, which wasn't the biggest demo, but they gave it to the highest definite recommend of a 70%. And a positive score at 81%. African Americans gave it a 67% definite recommend and an 80% positive score. Overall, look, it's an amazing performance. There's nothing negative to say about this at all. The question is, where is this thing going to go? Right, so it had no increased its Saturday number. It's a horror film, though, super hyped. You would think it would be very front-loaded. It's $70 million. What about international? So where do you think this thing is heading? So on a baseline, there's no way in hell it's going to get a Get Out multiplier of a 5x. It's just not going to happen. Is it possible? Sure. Is it going to happen? No. Because that was a very special case. 5x, 4x for movies like that, that's usually comes out of nowhere. Really typical word of mouth play there that takes weeks and months to sort of to take effect. That won't happen with us. So I would say baseline horror movies tend to have lower multipliers, more towards the 2.5 than the 3. But I think with this one, because of the critical sort of success of it, I think a 3 is kind of baseline. So I'd say 210 domestically is where it should go. I mean, well, that might be over giving it too much credit in terms of its legs. 2.5x on this would be what? 175 to 210. I mean, that feels like a really accurate range. I would say, I think it makes 200. I think there's going to be a repeat audience for this. Because it is a challenging film. I know the ending has been very... people have been critical of it. It's split the audience a little bit. So people may go back and see it a couple of times just to try and It's also a very chaotic film from what I hear. I've not seen it yet. So I'm thinking that people might go back and see it to try to re-engage it and try and figure it out like it's a puzzle. But in terms of the legs, I think, $200 million, good shot at that. Internationally, that's where it gets really tough with a movie like this. If you look at Get Out, it did 69% of its business domestically, which is US and Canada. That's very high, completely out of whack towards the normal film. Only doing 31% foreign is it's very, very low. So if we did that here, and I think it's going to do a little bit better than Get Out did internationally, you're looking at, let's just say it does 60% domestic versus 40% foreign. You're looking at probably 291, maybe $300 million worldwide. That's off a production budget of $20 million and probably a marketing budget of $70 to $100 million total for something like this. So this will be a massively profitable film for Blumhouse, for Universal. You're looking probably at least $150 million profit, definitely in that range. So it's a massive win. And, it's not unexpected either. This is one of those movies that you looked at tracking a few weeks ago and you're like, what are you talking about? $45 million for this, which would have been an outrageously good opening. But you could just tell in the air online, the vibe was this is going to go much higher than that. I think it could have maybe gone higher. I don't know what would have held it back. The marketing was pretty amazing for this. It was all over the place. They had that Super Bowl ad. They did a lot of advertising during the NBA and just sports. There's some during March Madness. They really marketed the hell out of this film. And a lot of that's Universal because they have the deep pockets to do something like that. I don't think Blumhouse would pour in $77 million in marketing for this. So it was just a great job all around. If you do I normally do postmortems for failures of films or movies that do quite poorly, but I think you can also do it for successful films. And I break it down in between product quality, product conception, marketing quality, and marketing quantity, and sort of how you market. And I think product conception wise, it's an original film, a totally original script. by Jordan Peele, who's already an Oscar winner for Get Out on his script on that one. And so product conception here was just fantastic. It looked super interesting. It had an immediate hook right from the trailer. Like, this is going to be awesome. Like, this looks crazy. What the hell's very mysterious too. You didn't really know what was happening in the trailer. I think the product quality speaks for itself. 8 out of 10 on Rotten Tomatoes in terms of actual critic score. That's very high. That'd be like an 80% on Metacritic, which is just super, super good. So product conception and product quality were both there. From a marketing perspective, the quality I thought was fantastic with the trailers and the different sort of visuals they did online with social media and then billboards and stuff like that. You'd see photos online of those, and it looked like they went all out for this. And how they marketed it, I think they ramped it up a little bit. I can't remember when the first trailer dropped. I think it might have been during the Super Bowl. No, maybe not. Maybe it was before that. It felt a little bit late. I'm thinking back to like It, where the marketing for It felt like it started 6 months before that movie came out, and it really built this sort of like, it wasn't even a question if you were going to see It opening weekend. Like, it was just like, when September 2017 rolled, yeah, of course I'm going to see it this weekend. Like, I've been thinking about it for the last 6 months. So I think there was a little bit, maybe it was a little bit too mysterious here, and it held back a little bit too much and waited a little bit too late to get it going. But I think they did a fantastic job overall. That could have been the difference, though, when you're thinking about like, why didn't this open at like 80 or 100? That could be the difference. But like, at the same time, original horror film opening in March, opening at 70, third biggest horror opening of all time. There's not really any fault here, is there? So the end of the story here is we'll see where it goes. Typical horror drop for a second weekend's pretty high. You're looking at like at least 55% to 60%, I would say, would be the average for a horror film, and on higher. Like, some of the biggest drops you'll see ever are horror films at like 65%, 68%, 70%. I don't think that's going to happen with us. I see more like a typical drop of like a 55 to 50%. So I think it's going to have decent legs. I think it's going to do 200 million. I think maybe 300 million worldwide. I think Universal is going to have a nice profit. And I think I'm excited. Like, I'm already excited for what Jordan Peele does next. Like, he's just hitting home run after home run. I'm definitely going to check out the Twilight Zone series that he's doing. I'm not sure, I don't know if he's like writing all of them or directing them. I'm not sure what his level of involvement is. I know that he's like the lead of it. But I think it's going to be awesome. So he's like he's the new It horror director. So he's the guy, and I think this has been a fantastic weekend for him and everybody involved with the film. Okay, so Us was number 1. We'll keep tracking that over the next few weeks. Amazing performance. Number 2 was Captain Marvel, $35 million, a 48% drop, which is very good, I would say. Still in 4,300 theaters. Per theater average was just about $8,200 per theater. Total take so far is $321 million. The big question about Captain Marvel now is, look, it's a grand slam. There's no arguing against that. It's just a wonderful performance overall. The question is, does it make it to that $400 million mark? I was really adamant about that like 2 weeks ago when it opened, just based on multipliers for movies like this. It felt like it was going to have like a middle of the road MCU multiplier. And so $400 million should have been an easy goal there. But I'm hearing chattering online that people are like, maybe it's not going to hit $400 million. It's kind of a wonky thing to argue about, but I do think that it's going to hit $400 million. I think this low drop this weekend kind of helps support that viewpoint. And hitting $400 million, like, does it matter? Blah, blah, blah. Yeah, of course it matters. It's a huge milestone for a domestic film, especially for something like Captain Marvel, where, it's not a top shelf character necessarily, top tier character. It's not a Spider-Man. It's not a Superman. It's not Batman. And it's a character that's kind of unproven. How is Brie Larson going to do in this role? Was it going to fit? Was it going to work? Well, it did work. People love it, and they're going back to see it over and over again. And that $400 million mark would be huge. And I think it's going to hit it. So just a really great performance overall by Captain Marvel in its third weekend. Just all positive news so far. What a great weekend. Number 3 this weekend was Wonder Park, $9 million, a 43% drop. Pretty typical for a children's animated film. Per theater average is kind of low, 2,300. Total take so far for Wonder Park is 29, almost $30 million. You can't complain for a movie that was essentially an absolute train wreck in development for the last 5 years. This is okay performance. Is it gonna like make money? No, probably not. But it's, they're mitigating their losses by this performance essentially. That was number 3. Number 4 was 5 Feet Apart. Really great drop, 33% drop on this. $8.7 million for the weekend. Added 63 theaters. Per theater average was just over $3,000 per theater in its second weekend. Total take so far for 5 Feet Apart is $26 million. Really strong performance. Lionsgate needs stuff like this to do well. This is kind of their bread and butter. This is a mid-tier film. Production budget on this was probably, I don't know, $20 to $40 million in that range. This is the type of movie that seemed to have disappeared a lot from the multiplex doing very well. But with holds like this, I think this one's going to be, it's not going to be $100 million in profit, but it's going to be a nice little profit for Lionsgate. And I think they're going to be happy with this performance. Number 5 was How to Train Your Dragon: The Hidden World, $6.5 million, 29% drop. Fantastic. Per theater average is just below $2,000 per theater. Total take so far for How to Train Your Dragon: The Hidden World, How to Train Your Dragon 3. I think it's 3, isn't it? It is a trilogy, the How to Train Your Dragon trilogy. It is sitting at $145 million in its 5th weekend. Great performance there. It's a good enough performance where Universal's probably going to be like, do we go back to this piggy bank again? Do we sort of create a How to Train Your Dragon cinematic universe? Is it too much? Is it like going to end up like the Lego movie universe where it just imploded right after it started? I don't know. I think they're going to be happy with this and sort of let this dragon sleep for a bit, maybe for like 4 or 5 years, and then come out with another one. But this is a really good performance. Tyler Perry's A Madea Family Funeral, supposedly the last Madea film that's coming out. I doubt that though. $4.5 million for the weekend, a 42% drop. Another good drop. It had a great drop last weekend too, sitting at $65 million so far. Let's see where it's at overall. It is now the 3rd best Madea film at $65 million. It just passed Medea's Witness Protection, and it should pass Boo and Madea Halloween. Who would have thought that was going to happen? Because Boo and Madea Halloween was like this like lightning in a bottle moment. It was October 2016. It was like I think it was like the only big Halloween movie coming out that weekend. I think Jack Reacher was also coming out. I don't know how I remember this stuff. I guess I did a show, but it's weird that I remember these actual weekends. So yeah, fantastic performance from Madea Family Funeral. I think it is going to play strong through Easter, which is like a month from now. So I definitely think it's going to pass Boo and Madea Halloween, which I never would have guessed. I don't think it's going to hit Madea Goes to Jail, which came out 10 years ago and did $90 million unadjusted. I don't think it's going to hit that, but Tyler Perry is probably like, I don't know if I want to put this series to rest yet if it's doing that well. If it's going to make $70 million, the production budget could not have been high on that either. Another Lionsgate. Lionsgate has 2 big wins here in the top 10, this and 5 Feet Apart. So that was at number 6. Number 7 was kind of a newer entry, Gloria Bell from A24. The indie sort of upstart that's doing quite well the last few years. That's not even a few years. I guess they've been around for like 6 years, but they just feel so fresh and new. 1.8 million on its expansion. It expanded into about 650 theaters. Per theater average was not great, $2,700. The word on this is that like every conversation I have about movies like Gloria Bell or A24, art films, platform releases is what they call in the industry. I call them art films. That's what they are. They play well in cultural centers. San Francisco, Chicago, Los Angeles, Dallas, Miami. They play well in those big cities where it has a cosmopolitan audience. They do not play well elsewhere. It's an art film. It's meant for people who are into art films. And if you're not going to go see it. And so that's what's happening here with Gloria Bell. It's just, there's not an audience for this necessarily in Omaha or the suburbs of San Antonio, Texas. Like, it's just not there. So an okay performance for this. I don't know what A24 expected. It's going to go to streaming probably pretty quickly. So when I was talking about like 5 Feet Apart and like that being a mid-tier film doing well, we haven't seen a lot of that recently. Gloria Bell is kind of an example of that art house film that just, it can't make enough money. It's just not going to make enough money. There's no way. And maybe A24 probably has as a way to make this thing actually get a return on their investment, maybe through HBO or Netflix. I'm not really sure how the financials work on the back end with that. I just don't see it's not doing a ton of business on exhibition with ticket sales. So, and remember, they only get half. The theater gets the other half. So it's at $1.8 million now. That's only $900K. So I don't know what that costs to make. I don't know what it costs to distribute, to market. That's not a lot of money in this business. So we'll see how it does. I don't think it's going to go anywhere, though. Number 8 was No Manches Frida. Number 2, we talked about this one last weekend. Per theater average, still strong. It's only in 472 theaters. Still did $3,700 per theater, sitting at $6.6 million so far. I imagine that's fantastic for a movie like that. That's so like a niche demographic that they're going after. Number 9 was Lego Movie 2. The second part, we talked about the implosion of the cinematic universe. 1.1 million, just crossed the $100 million mark. That is so pathetic. That is just like the most, I'm not like a stan for like Warner Brothers or Lego Movie, but like that was such a sure bet going into this year. And its performance is just so depressing to watch every week. Like, I just wish it would fall out of the top 10 so I don't have to talk about it anymore. But like $103 million in your 7th weekend for the Lego Movie sequel, that doesn't make any sense. And like Warner Brothers basically poisoned the well with the Lego Ninja movie, Lego movies. It's like they imploded that cinematic universe, and it's all on them. They did too much too soon. Should have done the Lego Movie 2 like 2 or 3 years after the first one. That's what I would have done. But I'm not a studio exec. Am I? I'm just a guy with a microphone. Let's move on to number 10. Alita Battle Angel is still somehow in the top 10. $1 million, 46% drop. Total take so far for Alita Battle Angel is $83 million in its 6th weekend. No matter how many shills they pay to talk about that movie, it is not a good performance. Captive State was just outside the top 10 in its 2nd weekend. And I want to note this one. Its per theater average was the worst in the top 20, I believe. Yep. $360 per theater this weekend in 2,500 theaters. That is definitely Focus Features. I don't know what they were thinking with this. I knew it was going to flop the moment I saw the trailer. I had no idea it was even coming out. This one just got dumped, I think, for contractual obligations. They need to play it in theaters for 2 weeks, and it'll basically be completely wiped out next weekend. Apollo 11 still doing okay from Neon. Apparently it's an amazing documentary. It came in at number 12. $1,300 per theater is not fantastic, though. It has done $6.8 million so far. Anything else? Green Book's still sticking around. Glass is still sticking around somehow in the top 20. The Upside is at 106. How about this for a story? The Upside might end up beating Glass. Upside's at 106. Maybe not. It's going to be like, it's going to be close. Glass is at 110. The Upside's at 106. Even the fact that they're close is just bizarre to me. I thought Glass was going to open at like 110. What does this mean, overinflating these movies? I don't know what's going on. I guess I get like the Captain Marvel stuff and the comic book movie stuff. I think that's going to translate out to other movies, and it just doesn't. Like DCEU and MCU owns that $150 million opening weekend. They just own it. And something like Glass or Us just doesn't really have a chance to get up to that amount. But the Upside STX needed to hit, and they got one. They finally got one. With the Upside, really great performance. Funny with my family, my call for a movie that's going to break out, it's sitting at $21 million, $22 million. Didn't really break out as I wanted to. Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, 15th weekend, still out there. 15th weekend, that means it probably should be on VOD and digital release right now, I think. At $190 million on its take at the box office. It should end up somewhere around that. Just amazing. Well, I was really negative on that one because it had a high production budget, but I don't know. It ended up having really amazing legs. Just like Spider-Man Homecoming didn't start out super strong, but had amazing legs. And so it's kind of a very similar story to that. And the quality of it apparently is amazing. So I think people just kept coming back to see it over and over again. Anything else on limited release? My weekly check-in with Happy Death Day to You, now sitting at 27, almost $28 million in its 6th weekend. I'm never going to understand why that movie did not do well. Bohemian Rhapsody is at 215 overall, 216. Barf. Mary Poppins Returns, somehow still in theaters, in 134 theaters, struggling to hit the 172 mark domestically. What a disaster. Hotel Mumbai did get released by, I guess, was that Bleecker Street? I thought Bleecker Street went out of business. Maybe they almost did go out of business. Or maybe I'm confusing it with another studio. One of the like startup studios basically went out of business, and I thought it was Bleecker Street, but maybe they got some funding. They put out Hotel Mumbai about the terrorist attack in 4 theaters, very typical platform art house release. Per theater average in New York, Los Angeles. Per theater average was $21K. It's going nowhere. That's a dead end. You got to break $40-50 million to really break out. If you're doing in that 4 theater release in New York and Los Angeles, and it's not going to get there, so it's not going anywhere. Okay, that is the top 10 with some almost the top 20. So let's talk a little bit about. There's not really a ton of like outside like Mumbai and that kind of stuff. Not a ton of art house releases to talk about. So let's focus on what's going to happen over the next couple of weeks. We're almost through March. How did that happen? Beach Bum from Neon. This is the Harmony Korine movie with Matthew McConaughey that opened up at South by Southwest. I don't know. I think it's going to do nothing. I don't think anybody's going to see this movie outside of like hipsters, which whatever. It's a small group of people. Like in the big cities, hipsters are going to see this, but even in the smaller cities, they're not going to see this probably. It's just a very specific demographic. I would love to go see it if there's a theater in St. Louis that plays it, but there probably isn't. I loved Spring Breakers. It reminds me a lot of that. I'm surprised they didn't do A24 because A24's first film ever, I think, was Spring Breakers, and I'm surprised that Neon, which is kind of like they're really competitor now. So Neon and A24 going head to head. Neon was started by somebody affiliated with the Alamo Drafthouse Cinemas in Austin, and so they're like the 2 indie upstarts that are competing for films, and then they won out Beach Bum. Business wise, it's not going to do anything. Dumbo is opening up, obviously from Disney, 4,000 theaters. I don't know. Like I felt like a week ago that it was really going to pop off, and I feel like still, if Easter was within 2 weeks, like maybe not this Sunday but the next Sunday, I think this would do a lot better. But maybe they're opening it at just the right time because they're going to have like 3 weeks of runway to Easter holiday. And this is the perfect Easter movie. Oh, it's about an elephant and families and whatever, nice things. It's Disney. I thought, like, I don't even know where it's going to open. I would suggest probably like a 50-ish opening, maybe 45 to 55, and then really strong legs, at least 3x, so 150 domestically would be my guess for this right now. But it could go anyway. I don't know which way the wind's blowing on that. I thought it was Hype Town last week, but I don't feel as much this week. Unplanned is also coming out from Pureflix. Pureflix means it's probably a Christian film. Unplanned, I'm imagining it's an abortion film, and let me guess, she's going to have the baby. Opening 1,000 theaters. Not going to do that much. Limited releases, Diane from IFC. I don't know that one. Screwball from Greenwich. And then some other stuff. Then let's talk a little bit about April. This is a good sort of segue talking about Shazam had a preview weekend. I believe it was just Saturday, and it did quite well. It pulled in $3.3 million from this early preview thing with Atom, which is like ATOM, which is like a ticket app. Really cool ticket app. So you should check it out. Kind of like an alternative to Fandango and Amazon. They did this preview thing. I think there was 3 showings, I want to say. So 3.3 million off of that. That's a really good sign for Shazam, which comes out, what is that, April 5th. Tough competition with Pet Sematary also that weekend. Best of Enemies from STX as well. That's not going to do all that much, I don't think. But that's a good sign for Shazam. I think Aquaman did about 2.9. It's not that comparable because I think Aquaman was a single showing early preview, and this is, I think, 3 different showings. So it's going to be it's not going to open like Aquaman did, I don't think. But that's a really good sign for Shazam, which is definitely an unknown quantity. It just seemed like a really bizarre movie to make, but I think it might actually work. I hear the quality is pretty good too with the social media reactions that I've heard so far. And then Pet Sematary, another horror film. Let's do this. 2 weeks out from us, we have Pet Sematary. The South by Southwest reaction to this was like too ecstatic. It felt very shilly. So I don't know where this is going to end up. It's not like the original Pet Sematary was good. It was just on TV the other day. It's like, okay, I'll watch this in passing. I'm not going to sit down and focus on this film because it's not worth it. But the new one looks kind of like, it looks really good marketing. I'll say this, very good marketing. The quality of film might be suspect, but we'll see. Then you got a lot of limited release coming out. A High Life, that looks really interesting from A24. Peterloo from Amazon Studios. Teen Spirit from Bleecker Street. Amazing Grace. I don't know that one. It's a documentary from Neon. See, Neon, A24, back and forth. Then the 12th of April, we have After from Viron. They put out that Serenity movie that I have to see. It's going to be a cult classic because it's so terrible. Hellboy comes out. I've heard nothing about Hellboy from Lionsgate Summit. Just nothing. I don't know what's going to go on with that. Little comedy from Universal. How do I not know about this one either? I feel like every week there's movies that come out from the producers of Girls Trip and Night School. Okay, that could do okay. And this is stuff like that's like prepping for the Easter holiday. Missing Link, an animation film from United Artists. I don't know what that is either. Zach Galifianakis, Hugh Jackman are the voices. What? How are these movies getting made? It makes no sense. Limited release wise, anything to talk about? A Dark Place from Shot Factory. Shot Factory is a really cool company. They don't do a ton of releasing though, so an interesting strategy there for them. And then on the 19th, is that Easter weekend? It probably is. The Curse of Ya Llorona. I'm really stoked for this. Apparently it's connected to the Conjuring universe. That's the hype. That's what the hypeage says. So wow, this is going to be, and I talked about this a lot over the last probably year or so. So what's happening is that with horror films in general, because it did so well, that amazing $100 million opening, that is like blood in the water to studio execs. And now we are seeing us, Pet Sematary, and Curse of Ya Llorona, which is essentially a Conjuring universe movie now, all within basically a month of each other, which is just not something you would normally see. So horror films are going to be massive this year. They're probably going to overplay their hand. Like I said, they were. They're not all going to be great. A lot of them got rushed into production. Oh, it did so well, so maybe we can make $100 million off this, this Pet Sematary remake. They probably will. So we're going to see tons of horror films. Now, for someone like me who's a horror film nerd, it's going to be awesome. It's going to be a lot of fun, but I worry that they're just saturating the market way too quickly, which is what always happens with horror. Like it happened after Scream, it happened after probably Halloween, it happened after Nightmare on Elm Street and Friday the 13th. They just flood the market, and then you hit like 1989 and there's like 10 different sequels coming out and they all crash and burn, and then like horror has to reboot essentially, which is just the cycle. I think we have a couple years out from crashing, but it's definitely, we're ramping up to the saturation point of horror films. And that's mostly it. Breakthrough comes out from Fox on the 17th of April. Penguins comes out from Disney. I don't know much about Breakthrough at all. I guess Topher Grace is in it. Whatever. He needs to stick to making Star Wars recuts. And then April 26th is the big day. Avengers Endgame comes out. And then we're kind of getting into summer already. Start talking about May. Yeah, I think next month is the stuff that's sort of that sticks out to me. It's going to be Dumbo, Pet Sematary, Shazam, Curse of Ya Llorona, and then of course Avengers Infinity War. And the big question leading into the end of April then will be, can Avengers Endgame, can that break the overall opening weekend record? I think it's going to. I think you're probably looking at like 260 opening weekend for that. It'll like reach the theoretical limit of what theaters can actually do in business. In any event, thanks for listening, guys. This is the Wildland Podcast. I will be back next weekend. Thanks.